Thank you, Wadey, and thank you so much to everyone for coming. I usually try to be usefully chatrach, but not to insert myself too much into the conversation, because that is the job of the moderator. I'm not a panelist. Today I'm going to take liberties because I know the panel, and most of you now are faces that have come to our previous dialogues. So in a sense, this space is a familiar space. And I've got views on the issues we're going to talk about today. So it's going to be far, far more of a dynamic conversation. I'm not going to be policing it too strictly. The most important thing is to make sure that we have adequate opportunity for you to express your stories, your viewpoints, and to engage whatever the panel members say on stage. Beyond that, we will all be in conversation with each other and also keeping tabs on no one speaking too much. But I don't want to be a moderator today because there's a couple of things I do want to say. So I'm going to kick us off, and then in turn, I will introduce and give my other panel members an opportunity to speak. Maximum 10 minutes, probably less for most of them. And then we will just shoot the breeze with you and stop at about 5 o'clock. The last couple of times, we were told we should have gone on, and Wade and I take that as a success criterion. We love it when you think that it was too short. So we will have a hard stop at 5 o'clock, and if there's further conversation to be had, it has to reverberate digitally in your homes, or maybe a second installment on another occasion. I want to make 3 points before I introduce Oliver to you. The first is about the composition of the panel, because it does bother me, and it did bother me, and Wadey knows that I pushed back. I was the one who initially said, maybe men should talk about these issues. And then she loved the idea, and then I was like, oh no, actually we shouldn't. And I then engaged right up to the second when she was ready to hit the press button to actually send out the poster. I had engaged some of my friends, particularly my black feminist friends, to just check in with them whether this is madness. Because I think 9 times out of 10, a manel, which is an all-male panel, is unacceptable. But I wondered whether such panels are a priori unacceptable or whether it depends on the intention, the context, and what you set up. And in the end, after speaking to some of my black feminist friends, I was very comfortable with it. So the optics on stage will look horrible on social media if you don't provide context, which is why I haven't engaged anyone on this on social media. But in this forum, I'm happy to have that conversation. And I think it ties to the substantive issues. I think that we are the ones who rape. I know that we are the ones who rape. We are the ones who must come up with the solutions. You as women and as girls need a break. If we can be experts at preying on you, then we can be experts on undoing our own behavior. I mean, it's madness to me that women are supposed to be at the center of the conversation about how to stop rape culture and how to stop rape. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me. So that is why I'm comfortable with the panel. And for me, the analogy between gender and race is often useful, not always. But in this instance, there is a useful analogy. I don't take invitations to literary festivals where I'm asked as an author to come and speak about race anymore, because I'm just sick and tired. I'm hurtful as a black person to tell white people how comfortable or not to be in their skin in this country. If you are fluent in white privilege, you can be fluent at dismantling it. And I would love to come to this museum at a next installment where we talk about how will we dismantle white supremacy, and it's an all-white panel. Why do you need a black body to help you unravel your own privilege? It's not rocket science. If racism is not rocket science, if benefiting from racism, even if you're not a direct perpetrator of it, is not rocket science, then why can't you unbundle the mess without the help of a black body present? So there's a couple of dangers that we need to guard against. In general, demographically unrepresentative panels are unacceptable, but not always. The flip side is also true, by the way. I have been party to conversations where event organizers will first come up with the people they'd love to have on there. So you might have 3 white men being discussed, and then someone will say, oh shit, we better have women on. Oh gosh, we better have a black person on. So you also have the performance of liberal representativity, but that is often disingenuous, where a black person may be on a panel, but actually that person is not regarded as the expert. So that you have the look of a mixed panel and the appearance of a well-curated event, but in reality, you know that a lot of the people who are in the audience are coming to hear the white person speak. Or funny enough, the converse is also true, as I've experienced at the Franschhoek Literary Festival, where you will have nominally some white people on the panel on race, but actually, most of the white members in the audience are there to hear what the black person has to tell them about race. So there are many different ways in which we need to tackle this problem around rape and rape culture. There are many conversations to be had. There are many different fora to be set up. Mixed panels can work, But there's also a very important space that we need to create where we as men can not pretend like we aren't fluent in misogyny and say, please, please, Wadey, please can you help us to just understand, like, sometimes we pinch a woman's butt at work and we don't really know that it's misogynistic. Can you please be part of the panel so you can give us a shopping list of all the things we mustn't do? No. If you are an ally in the fight for gender equality, why can't you as a man have that conversation? Why can't Mags and I talk about my behavior? Why do I need that conversation to be mediated through a female body? I think women need a psychic break from fighting misogyny, and I think men need to own up to our role in it, and therefore the conversations we need to engender in the same way in which every single conversation about white privilege does not need to include a black person. Is it the only way of approaching these issues? Absolutely not. One of my favorite South Africans, I can't cite him because I don't have his permission, turned down an opportunity to be on the panel. I deeply respect him. I was hoping he'd be in the audience so that we can engage today. He makes a very important point, which was the deeper point that I wrestled with, which is the relational aspect. If part of dismantling rape culture is about learning how men and women can respect each other in terms of our mutual presence in a particular space, then isn't it important to have mixed panels so that you can practice that relational element? I think that argument is overstated, to be honest, because you can have a different range of conversations set up in different ways, all of which mutually and overall reinforce one another. So there's an opportunity for me to rehearse how to not be misogynistic at work tomorrow when most of my producers at 702 are female, and I need to learn how to deal with my own masculinity in that space. It's not as though this 2-hour forum is going to be the first and the last opportunity to get that relational element involved in impaired gender relations right. So we mustn't overstate what that means. And so those are some of the things that I've been wrestling with. But that said, panels have enormous power. Spaces like these are very powerful, and I think it's right that awkward questions are asked about how we constitute them. And 9 times out of 10, I wouldn't be part of an all-male panel. Today, I'm very happy to be part of this panel. On the question of rape, for me, there's one distinction that I wanted to make, and I will leave it there and come back to it in dialogue if anyone wants to pick up on it. I think there are 2 different sets of issues we need to deal with in order to bring an end to rape. There is the immediate set of questions around criminal justice, law enforcement, and whether or not we provide sufficient guarantee that women and girls in particular will be able to walk freely, as Wadey was saying, from point A to point B. And the criminal justice system fails us. And it's unsurprising in this country because the criminal justice system is part of a government and a state that is also deeply patriarchal and misogynistic. So South Africa is not a country for women, it's not a country for girls. It is deeply misogynistic, and we find that even the institutions that are supposed to safeguard women's rights are also the ones that are captured, that are either indifferent or very often actively involved in stoking rape culture. And so we need to talk about the proximate issues, the immediate safety issues, the criminal justice issues. But then I want to distinguish that from the deeper issues. You know, the law is inherently adversarial. There are winners and losers when it comes to legal processes. By the time you run to the courts, it means that you've already failed to deal with the underlying social drivers of a phenomenon. And so the real question around culture, the culture part of rape culture, is one that I'm hoping we will spend a lot of time on today. What is it about us as men that make us attack you women? What is it? And I think it has to do with a phrase that is becoming current, but it's becoming current too quickly, and we therefore need to unpack it before it rolls off our tongues, but without any clear meaning. It has to do with toxic masculinity. It has to do with what it means to be a man, which is the other danger with all male panels, is that it implicitly and unintentionally can also set up the idea that there is such a thing as what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. We've got very toxic ideas around masculinity that I think feed into rape culture. Rape is not about sex. It is about power, it's about violence, and even if you had to chemically castrate a rapist, they will find some other way of exerting the power that they wish to exert over a woman. It is not about genitalia. It's not even sex. It really is just violence, and it is rooted in very toxic conceptions of what it means to be a man, exacerbated. It's a global truth, but it's exacerbated in South Africa by features particular to our society. Deep inequality, the history of a violent state, the migrant labor system, poor role modeling in the lives of boys and men, all of those things combined set us up to be the perfect predators of women in this country. And we have to recover our humanity as boys. We have to recover healthy ways of being males in the world and being human in the world rather than being gendered in the world. And I think that for me is really where the law is a blunt instrument with which to deal with rape culture. Rape culture is fundamentally about toxic masculinities, and we need to unravel that a little bit. I'm going to leave it there. The final remark I want to make is this conversation will be complex because the men that we have here think very long and hard about these issues in a complex and intersectional manner, and that is appropriate. There are class issues that we need to bring into this conversation. Orientation needs to come into this conversation. And we need to talk about homophobia. And I've just written my Mail and Guardian column about the Deputy Minister of Higher Education. Homophobia and patriarchy are cousins. So we need to complicate the conversation, even if it leaves us feeling, there wasn't one clear message today, one clear answer. That's okay, because in reality, rape culture piggybacks on a range of factors that interrelate in very complicated ways. So we can't be reductionist about it. So take, for example, the question of, which is very close to my heart and some of the panelists, when it comes to being a gay man. The violence inherent in patriarchy and the toxic masculinity that is so prevalent in our country, it runs so deep that no man is spared its noxious effects. You find, for example, that even I'm gay men, we have toxic masculinity that we rehearse. If someone is homophobic and violent, like the Deputy Minister of Higher Education, you cannot even assume, and I do not know what his sexual orientation is, but you cannot even assume, as many people are assuming in the last couple of days, that this is a straight man who's just being violent and hates being called gay. It's actually, you can't. Some of the most misogynistic behavior I've seen have been from gay men. Some of the worst homophobia I've seen have been from gay men. And the reason is that the underlying misogyny that feeds into rape culture is a cousin of homophobia. And the connection is very simple. We grow up as boys being told, there are certain ways you shouldn't behave. Men can't have sex with men. Men can't show emotion. Men can't cry. Men are not allowed to be vulnerable. And effectively, what holds all of that together is do not behave like a woman. And then we have a stereotype, which itself is problematic, what it means to be a woman. So at the point at which you call someone a moffie, a stabane, gay, the reason why that lands violently is because the person hears you effeminizing them, and effectively they hear you calling them a woman, and God forbid you should do that to a man that has toxic masculinity running throughout them, including self-hate and internalized stigma on the part of even gay men, which is why there's a lot of misogyny within the gay community, and why, for me, for example, I have butch privilege as a gay man, because my masculinity means that I'm immune to certain kinds of violence that effeminate men experience, to rape culture, in the sense that anything that is seen to be too closely associated with a female body is regarded as a slight for a man to be associated with. So gay men can be misogynistic, can hate women. Gay men often show zero empathy for lesbian women, for example. So this is only about powerful straight men, powerful straight white men. This is a conversation that indicts all men. And Professor Kopano Ratela, in his latest book, Liberating Masculinities, does a brilliant job of almost giving us a taxonomy of the different kinds of poisonous masculinities in society. And he says there's a working class black male version of toxic masculinity that has a particular strands to it that needs to be understood. It's very different to the straight white male who's a CEO. But we are all toxic in our masculinity. It plays out differently, and we need to understand the particularities as well as the overlapping consensus between it. So that's all I'm going to say for now. Toss that out as some thought starters, and we can pick up on any